If you right now know the information that I have about one of the teams in the Pop-Tart Bowl, just sit with it for a moment. Are you ready for this?
It's the arrival. I came in the league, went straight for the title.
Intercepted! Rod Roar! And Michigan will win the game! Touchdown! Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvelous!
Hail, hail, Michigan, the champions of college football.
There's nothing quite like the game.
Michigan versus Ohio State.
This is The Rivalry, proud to be part of the Varsity Network from Learfield and sponsored by Elevated Integrity Construction.
Welcome back to The Rivalry Podcast. My name's Jace. That's JP. Michigan, Ohio State, your garbage-free college football podcast focused on the Ohio State-Michigan football rivalry from River Radio Ministries and presented by Elevated Integrity Construction. It's sports talk without all the tangents you don't need. And we have got a lot to get to as the college football playoff rankings dropped yesterday. We record these on Monday mornings. And so this is all pretty fresh, emotional
I've only
reaction.
been allowed to be in one Facebook argument over this already. So.
You've only been limited to
and
one?
I want to know right now.
And it wasn't even against me, to be honest.
Yet.
Let's spin the wheel, a little bit of wheel route to break the ice on social media at Rival Pod on Twitter and X, also on Instagram and on YouTube, where you can be watching right now. You can also go online to rivalpod.com.
I like this one. Which lower seed has the best chance to win it all? Now, I preface this by saying by lower seed, I mean the ones that in the first round have an away game. So that 9 to 12 slot.
So that would be Tennessee, Indiana,
SMU, and Clemson. Which of those four teams do you think has the best shot to win it all?
None of them.
That's not the question, Jace. Do you want me to go first?
No, because I really want to think about this without your influence, which is how I want to do most things.
Advice anyways?
I don't, but then it sits in my head. I would say... I don't like this at all. I'm going to go with SMU.
Let's go. I've influenced you anyways.
Do they have a good chance? No.
But they've got the easiest one.
And I think that's the path, right? And we'll get into this in a second, but that 6-11 matchup, like there's no doubt, I don't think, that Penn State ended up with probably the best spot in the entire bracket.
Texas too, though.
And we'll get to that, but SMU is a good, they're a good team, right? There's a reason that they're in the playoffs,
these
right?
Teams are good teams.
But the fact that they would get to play Penn State, which is not an easy matchup, but I think
Penn State,
but
and
I
it's
think
a whiteout.
Of the matchups there, that's probably the best one. And I'm especially looking ahead to the next round where you get Boise State, who deserves to be in the playoff, does not deserve a bye. We'll get into that too. It's just, that feels like the best path. Like that bottom of the bracket feels like the place you want to be. I would almost say Clemson.
They're not getting past
I'd almost
Texas.
say Clemson. But even if they got past Texas, you've got Oregon in that bracket, it's just, it's tough.
So if Clemson were to upset Texas, which ain't going to happen, they would play number 4 Arizona State. An Arizona State versus Clemson matchup, I could see Clemson winning that.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. That's the bottom line for any team that did not get a home matchup. Because I'd be, let's walk down the line too. I'd be tempted to say Tennessee. Tennessee's got a great shot to get past Ohio State. That's a coin flip game right now. But Oregon's sitting there. So
Oregon's sitting right there.
At the end of the day, any of these teams have to get through Oregon, and that's what makes this really difficult. Okay,
I'm right there with you. I've got SMU. I think they lucked out against Penn State a little bit because it's a noon game.
That helps.
It is a whiteout. It is going to be cold. It is at Happy Valley. All of those are going to play a factor.
I don't think they'll get through.
I don't think so either. But if I'm looking at which team, and this isn't which team has the easiest, you want to talk about which team has the easiest path to make it to the semis, it's Georgia, and I don't think that's even an argument.
Ooh, okay. We'll talk about that.
But SMU and Penn State, I think if SMU can squeak by them, I'm interested in that Boise State-SMU matchup. I'm not sold outside of Ashton Jeanty. I'm just not entirely sold on Boise.
Well, yeah, I'm not either because... And I've said that, I think we're in the same boat here. I love Ashton Jeanty. I think he should win the Heisman. And yet, from a team perspective, this is a team that beat UNLV twice, skirted their way past San Jose State, skirted their way past Wyoming. That doesn't do much for me. Yeah. That doesn't do much for me.
It's like
when
watching
we talk
Iowa
about
with Caleb Johnson, and you're like, yeah, you've got like a monster in the backfield,
but what else do you have?
But what else you got?
Yeah,
nothing.
So we'll get into that more here in a second. But yeah, it's tough sledding for any team that's not hosting a game, I think, in the first round here. By the way, I want to say this as we jump into some of that initial thought on the college football playoff. With Ohio State in the postseason, obviously there's a handful of things that could happen. They've got Tennessee at home in the first round. The winner of that game is headed to Pasadena to play Oregon in the Rose Bowl. And want to let you know that if you appreciate the podcast, if you love what we're doing, we're a small budget podcast. All right. We're an arm of River Radio Ministries. It's a small budget podcast. If you want to support the podcast, whether that be towards, potential travel stuff for you for heading to the Rose Bowl.
You don't want to go?
No. Yeah, I wanted to go last year.
This year's different.
Quick tangent. I wanted to go last year and they said, no, you can't come. And they gave Ben Herbstreit a credential.
RIP.
Which honestly, the goodest boy, and he deserved it more than we did.
A king.
But if you want to support things like, hey, postseason travel, you want to support marketing of the podcast for next year, you want to support whatever that looks like. One, we've got t-shirts at rivalpod.com. You can get your own t-shirt. Two, if you just like, hey, I'm good on the t-shirt, but I want to throw a little something your way to say, hey, appreciate what you guys are doing, can catch the vision for what you're doing here. Rivalpod.com. We've got a little support tab that goes a really long way. So thank you for considering that. And even if you can't do that, thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing at RivalPod, wherever you get your podcast. Tons of love
on our YouTube channel too this past week. Our highest rated video was the reaction from the game. I think we were at like 7,500 views, tons and tons of interaction and comments going. Love getting into debates with all you guys.
Biggest episode that we have ever had. So thank you so much for supporting in that way as well. All right. So the initial thoughts we've touched on some of this for the college football playoff. I thought just from a bracket seeding standpoint, I thought the committee did a really good job with this.
You nailed it. Didn't you get every single one right before they announced it?
Before the show, maybe like an hour before, I said, I have no clue what the committee is going to do, which fair, right? Like this is why this is both the beauty and rage of the college football playoff
Everybody
committee.
knew Oregon was going to be one, Georgia was going to be two. I had that
one correct. No, but I went down the bracket about an hour before the selection show and I batting 1,000. Yeah. And we'll get into here in a second whether, what that looks like as far as Penn State, Ohio State, what that could have looked like, Texas, Notre Dame, what that could have looked like. But initial thoughts on the teams that got in. And in particular, I'm curious about SMU and Alabama. How do you feel about SMU getting in over Alabama? Because that's obviously the big question that people had. And this gets us a little bit into the conference title conversation, but just gut reaction to that.
My gut reaction is I feel like Alabama probably did deserve to. I don't want to say deserved because that's not accurate. Do I think Alabama is a better team than SMU? Yes. So in that sense, do I think they would have been a tougher matchup to see rather than like an Alabama versus Penn State? I don't think Penn State survives that. But now I'm looking at SMU versus Penn State going, okay, well, Penn State's going to escape that. They're going to play Boise, probably get that. And now they're going to be in the semis. Whereas if they play an Alabama first round, I'm not confident on that. I'm probably honestly more 65-35 on that, where I think 65% Alabama probably wins that matchup, even though it's at Happy Valley. I think they did have a little bit tougher of a schedule. Alabama did. And that's kind of what prevented them. And I've seen a bunch of arguments and people talking, well, now we're just going to schedule cupcake schedules then and so on and so forth so that we don't have these. We're going to get punished for having a tough schedule and whatever else.
And here's go ahead.
The softest response I've ever heard is that.
Well, because here's the reality for Alabama. That's not what kept them out of the playoff. Yeah. They lost conference games. They lost to I'm blanking. They lost one good game. Well, yeah, there was was it Tennessee? Was it Georgia? They lost a big game somewhere along the way.
No, they beat Georgia. They lost to Tennessee.
This is terrible. Was it Tennessee?
I believe so.
Okay, let's say Tennessee for the sake. But regardless of whether it was Tennessee or whoever, every game Alabama lost was a conference game. This wasn't, we scheduled Notre Dame in South Bend and got beat, and that kept us out. No, what kept you out was you lost to Vanderbilt. And that even isn't the end of the story. What really kept you out was you went into Norman, which is a conference game, and got beat 24-3 by a god-awful Oklahoma Sooner team.
Yeah. Well,
that's, if you want to talk about what kept you out, you did.
And that argument of, well, we're just going to schedule cupcakes. Why we're getting punished for scheduling hard games? You lost those games, my guy. What happens when you go play in the college football playoffs and you're playing these top ranked teams?
You were not left out.
You think the result is all of a sudden going to change? No, it showed who you are. But I also think, to their point, playing in the SEC, and I usually hate this argument, but I would say the same thing for the Big Ten. Those conferences are built different.
They are.
And so you're looking at a college football playoff that has 1, 2, 3, 4 teams from the Big Ten in it. That's a tough conference. Same thing for the SEC. You've got Texas and Georgia, who people thought Georgia were kind of on the cusp of maybe potentially being in that 10 to 12 spot, maybe even being left out if they lost against Texas this weekend. And then now you're looking at them being the number 2 seed.
Yeah. Well, and I don't even know if I would agree that they were going to get left out with a loss to Texas. I don't think that was happening. The Georgia Tech game the week before would have been, they would have had to have won on Saturday to stay in, because they would have had 3 losses at that point. At the end of the day, if I'm looking at Alabama objectively, I have zero sympathy. I have zero sympathy for any 3-loss team that gets left out. Like a 2-loss team right on the cusp there. Okay. Like that might be a little bit different. Miami has a better argument in my mind. And by the way, Miami did not deserve to get in.
Nope.
But argument to argument, Miami has a better argument for getting to the college football playoff than Alabama does. Why? Because Alabama lost 3 games, including 2 to average to very below average teams.
Well, and I think you can
Alabama kept Alabama out of the playoff.
And you can use that same argument where I think I look at a Miami team and I go, yeah, they're probably better 9 times out of 10 than SMU. But you didn't get it done in the regular season, and that's the reward you get for it. Point blank, end of story.
If you wanted to get in, you should have won your games. Like that's the bottom line for me here. I want to talk a little bit more about the value of a conference championship. Before I do that, I want to say a big thanks to our friends at Elevated Integrity Construction, because maybe you feel like Kalen DeBoer in Alabama. You know what you're doing isn't working and you need to transfer in some help. That's not Alabama's main issue, but I wrote this like weeks ago, so just go with it here. Our friends at Elevated Integrity Construction are the portal to a successful project. Aaron Carroll and his team, they've been doing this a long time. They'll communicate openly and honestly, leaving you wowed at the finished project. Home, church, or business build, go with the folks with integrity in their name. It's elevatedintegrity.com. The Rivalry is also proud to be part of the Varsity Network from Learfield this season, a must-have for every college football fan, and free in the App Store and Google Play Store. Live college football games and podcasts just like this one. Search for the Rivalry Podcast or your favorite team in the Varsity Network app. And again, already mentioned this on social at RivalPod, or support the podcast, read the blogs at RivalPod.com. So one of the big questions coming into this, particularly because this is an Ohio State, Michigan podcast from Columbus, was what happens with Penn State?
Yeah.
If Penn State loses to Oregon, which they did, lost by 7, 8, lost by a score,
7.
Lost by a score to Oregon.
Yeah.
What happens to Penn State in regard to their ranking with Ohio State? And this comes back to, what is the value, not just of a conference championship, but what is the value of playing in a conference title game? Particularly, we talked a little bit about SMU, Alabama. This will relate to that too. But I'm particularly curious, because I know we disagree on this. As an Ohio State fan, looking at Penn State losing the conference championship, how do you evaluate conference title games in the current format, which we both agree is pretty flawed?
Yeah, I guess, and this is going to make me sound similar to like an Alabama fan, but I would say the same thing for Notre Dame and Texas.
That's fair. Yeah.
I see why they chose the order that they did. It makes sense to me, and it still makes it to where those conference games have value to it. Because if Penn State, if Texas would have been flipped for a Notre Dame, Ohio State, now those teams go, okay, well, what's the point of playing in this if when Correct. I lose, I just get punished?
It would have made more. It goes back to what Lane Kiffin, and I by the way, I was not on board with this when Lane Kiffin said it. I've kind of come around to it, where he had remarked right before they lost to Florida, and it didn't matter, which was objectively hilarious, that he was basically bemoaning the fact of going, wait, why would I get my team into a conference championship game when I'm safe right now?
Yeah.
If they had won out, they didn't, so it didn't matter. But if Ole Miss had won out, his argument was, if we win out, we're in the playoffs. Why would I jeopardize that?
Well, and I think you're looking at
that's a fair conversation.
You're looking at that from the other side of things when you're Notre Dame and you don't get even a chance to play in a conference championship and you lost one game. It was on a last-second field goal and you mollywopped everybody else on the schedule. And now you get pushed back because, well, you didn't play for a championship.
Well, that's Notre Dame's fault for not joining a conference, though.
It is.
To me,
but
that's different. I have no sympathy for that. But I'm talking more about from an Ohio State perspective, where you do play a conference championship, or you do play in a conference.
Yeah.
And particularly, and I know this is where we've disagreed, where you have a mutual opponent in Oregon and you had a head-to-head with Penn State. Did they get it right putting Penn State ahead of Ohio State in your mind?
No. And I think where I stand on that is exactly
That's a great response, by the way. No,
not at all. I think in my mind as a football fan, I don't, and this is gonna sound weird. I think that they put the 12 most deserving. Sure. Did they put the 12 best? I'm not confident. I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay, you have Penn State over Ohio State. Ohio State beat Penn State on the road at Happy Valley, a huge game. Ohio State dominated Indiana, who also is in the college football playoffs. And then they lost by 1 point to the number one team who has destroyed almost everybody they've played this year, including that Penn State team that Penn State lost to by more than Ohio State. So I look at this from just a strength of schedule, the games that they've already played, and I go, okay, well, Ohio State lost by 1 to Oregon on the road in Autzen, not on a neutral field. They beat they beat Penn State on the road. They beat another top team and didn't just beat them, they dismantled Indiana. Right there are 3 key games I'm looking at. Penn State, in every big game they had this year, they lost. They lost to Ohio State at home. They lost to Oregon in the Big Ten Championship. What other notable win do they have on their schedule?
If you're Penn State, you're probably going to say Illinois. And which, by the way, that's not comparable. I will agree with you on that.
Yeah. And so in
the rest of this is garbage, but go on.
So I'm looking at that and I'm going, no, you can't tell me that Penn State is a better team than Ohio State because I think this season proved they're not. I would say the same thing with Indiana. Indiana played absolutely nobody this year. And then they played Ohio State and got destroyed. I don't think Indiana's got a chance on this earth to beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame.
Would you have kept Indiana out of the playoff?
I wouldn't have been sad about it in my mind, and I think I would have kept Penn State in a later seed. In my mind, Indiana and SMU, you flip them out for Alabama and Miami, and I think you have the 12 best teams in college football in the playoffs.
Miami, though, and it's the I sent you this GIF when we were first talking about this. The Ben from Parks and Rec, I don't even have time to tell you how wrong you are. Actually, it's going to bother me if I don't. Miami has no business being in the playoff. I disagree fully with you.
Do you think Indiana does?
Yeah. They went 11. They went 11-1.
But you were at that game.
Yeah, they're not.
That's the exact thing we're talking about with Alabama.
There's a tier level to this for sure. There's a tier level to this. But Indiana, here's the advantage for Indiana. Number one, you have to part of the question, and sorry, I'm kind of talking in a couple different places here. You have to value wins and losses. It's not we only lost X but we won.
For sure.
It's got to be both. So 11-1, that's substantial, especially when you're looking at 2-loss Miami, 3-loss Alabama.
Yeah.
The other thing that Indiana did, besides win, is you can talk about strength of schedule, and I think that's fair. You can talk about one big game that they lost and lost pretty handily, and I think that's fair. However, Miami lost games that they shouldn't have. Mm-hmm. Indiana didn't. Indiana beat up on teams that they were supposed to.
But who did they play?
Well, but I'm saying, do you think that the teams that Miami got beat by Syracuse, right?
Yeah.
Miami, it felt like every week. I mean, the Virginia Tech game should not have won that game, benefited from a horrible decision by the officials. And frankly, at Cal, the same thing happened with the targeting call. So I'm looking at Miami going, you both lost games that you shouldn't have lost, and you almost lost other games. You barely won games that you should have won by a lot. And Alabama, same thing. Alabama's got the marquee win on the schedule, but also you lost to Oklahoma and you lost to Vanderbilt, and that's just unforgivable at some point.
That's why I'm saying I understand why the committee did what they did. But,
I think Indiana should be in over both of them.
But let me ask you this. Would you rather watch Indiana versus Notre Dame or Miami or Alabama versus Notre Dame? Which game are you more excited to tune into?
I am more interested to watch Alabama Notre Dame, but the question isn't, hey, which one makes a better TV show?
But I think that's where it gets into the debate of deserved versus better. And I think that's where I kind of go 50-50 because I understand exactly why this order is the way it is. I think all of these teams, I think you have to keep an Indiana in when they have one loss. But if I'm looking at this and you're asking me, do I think Indiana is a better team than Alabama? No. Do I think Indiana is a better team than Miami? No.
But based
do I
on
also
what,
think,
though? Based on what?
Miami's got key wins throughout the year. I also think Alabama beat Georgia. Or was it Georgia or did they beat...
I was going to say that logjam of the SEC is getting confused.
I know,
but we're like
it was Alabama that beat Georgia.
That's only part of it, though. That's only part of it because a lot of it depends on which Alabama team shows up. Is it the Oklahoma team? Is it the Vanderbilt team? Which Miami shows up? And frankly, I think Indiana could beat Miami right now, head to head.
See, and I don't. That's where I would disagree.
And that's where you've got to value. You've got to value the actual games and actual results on the field when you talk about Indiana versus Miami or versus Alabama.
So
Indiana's got to get in.
So in my mind, why don't you have Indiana above Ohio State and Tennessee? If they've only got one loss.
Because that's not the only factor. But I'm saying if you're talking about, well, Alabama should get in because XYZ, it's like there's no way. There's no way a 9-3 team should get in over an 11-1 team. There just isn't. As far as, to jump back into head, I guess, but to go back to the Penn State, Ohio State thing, like there is I'll give you this. There's absolutely an argument for, I don't agree with it, but there's absolutely an argument for Ohio State being over Penn State. Like for someone to say, no, there's not. It's like, okay, you're just proving the fact that there's a discussion there. Here's why I think they got it right is because I just, number one, the whole system is flawed, and we'll get to what do you do with
the
this?
First year?
What do you do with this moving forward? Got some thoughts on that. The way that it's set up, where conference champions get the automatic bye, whatever. Like the committee has said, and I think you have to have this. There has to be an incentive for playing in your conference championship game. You cannot, and I've got a couple exceptions to this. As a general rule, you cannot and should not punish teams for playing in their conference championship game. Penn State should not be punished for playing in a game Ohio State didn't qualify for. And there are exceptions to that. Here's where I would have accepted Penn State dropping behind Ohio State. If Penn State already had 2 losses going into that game, if Penn State had to lost to Ohio State
and had they played anybody else, they probably would have.
And let's say they lost to Illinois or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. And somehow still got into the championship game. Obviously that wouldn't have happened. Whatever. Just go with me on this.
Yeah.
So now they've lost to Oregon in the championship game and have a 3rd loss. Yeah. There's no, number one, they're probably not making the playoff. Number 2, they're certainly not ahead of Ohio State. That's an exception to that. It's not just an absolute rule. The other big thing is that if you get blown out, I think that changes the conversation. If Oregon had gone out there and beat Penn State 42-10, I don't think Penn State has an argument to be ahead of Ohio State.
But because they kept it close.
A 1-score, and I get what you're saying about, well, we lost by what? A 1-score loss to Oregon in a conference title game, you should not be punished for. I at that point, if that becomes a thing, then you go back to the Lane Kiffin comments where you go, then why in the world would Penn State sitting at, what were they, 3rd, 4th in the country? Why would you ever play that game?
3rd.
Hey, we've got COVID. That's a joke. Okay. Hey, we got delayed. We got delayed on the tarmac and we can't make it. You're perfectly safe. You've got a great spot. So if you're going to say, hey, Penn State's got to drop behind because, well, they lost to this team over here, like that opens up, I think, a whole Pandora's box of mess. And I just don't think you can play that way. I don't think you can play that way because here's the other thing. This goes back to what I said a few minutes ago about when we're talking about, well, Ohio State has this win over here. They do. Ohio State has better wins than Penn State does. They've got the head-to-head argument. And yet you also have to factor in the losses. They lost to Oregon. I don't care that it was on the road. They lost to Oregon. That's a loss in your schedule. And the biggest one in the world that we haven't even mentioned yet, which is horrible for this podcast, is you lost to Michigan. And so that's why I'm not going to stomach a lot of sympathy. I will stomach no sympathy because I'm a Michigan guy. If I'm trying to be objective, I don't have a lot of sympathy for Ohio State not getting a better seed from Penn State. You should have beat Michigan. If you want a better seed, if you want to be ahead of Penn State, if you want to be either in the 1 seed or that coveted 5 seed, maybe you shouldn't have lost the biggest spread in the 120-year history of the game.
And that's where I agree with you, but I think in my mind,
that's comparable to the Oklahoma loss, except it was at home.
Yeah, and
that's unforgivable.
And my thing is, I agree with you on that, and that's where I'm kind of torn 50-50. It depends on what you're specifically asking. Did I think the committee got it right? Yes, because I agree with you that you can't punish a Penn State for going in there. But if you're asking me, do I think that they got the 12 best teams in the best order, 1 through 12? No, I don't. I think, and this isn't any knock against them because it's the same thing. They did what they were supposed to do. They won their championship. Texas is better than Arizona and Boise State. I would say Ohio State's better than Arizona and Boise State and Penn State and probably Notre Dame. There's a handful of teams where they just seem out of order as far as
you had me in the first half. I'm not going to lie.
Who do I think is better?
Yeah.
And there are teams that are later down the road. Like I think Tennessee is probably better than an Arizona State and a Boise. And they're ranked at 9. Like that's where I think the conversation differs. And so it's not me saying Ohio State should have absolutely been ahead of them. It's more so saying, are you asking me who the best 12 teams are 1 through 12? I'm putting Ohio State above those. I'm probably going Oregon, Georgia, Texas, then maybe Ohio State in that group of 12.
I just don't think there's any way for you to do that.
You can't with how the system is set up. I'm saying if you're asking me to rank,
straight up rankings,
rank those top 12.
There's still no way though. With that bad of a loss to Michigan, there's no way that Ohio State can be up there. But it does bring us to kind of so what do you do to fix this moving forward as a committee? Because I'm a big fan of and this is not original to me, so I'm kind of hodgepodging this together here. I'm a big fan of conference champions automatically get in the playoff, not necessarily an automatic bye.
Yeah. Well, you're seeing that with Clemson.
So Clemson winning the ACC absolutely deserves to be in the playoff. They do not deserve a bye, and obviously they don't get one. Arizona State deserves to be in the playoff because they just won the Big 12. They do not deserve a bye. That's a good football team. That is not we deserve a bye football team. And so I think that's one adjustment I'd like to see be made moving forward is winning your conference has to matter, or you may as well dissolve all conferences.
Yeah, but then I guess that's the other thing, though, is does it ultimately matter if you've got an Arizona State that I think they have, 2 losses?
Yeah, they are 11-2.
So Arizona State goes and wins their conference. They get the automatic bid. You don't think that they should.
Correct.
So where would you rank a team like that wins that? I think they got it right with Clemson. Clemson being ranked 12 because they already had 3 losses. They deserved. They were the
lowest. I think they ended up being ranked 16th or something.
Yeah, that to me makes sense. They should have been 12. I saw some people putting them in the automatic bid at 4, and I thought that will just gross me out.
Yeah, there's no chance.
And I kind of started to persuade myself of I think that maybe will happen.
I think if you go that route, then you end up, I guess, you probably end up with just the top 4 ranked teams end up getting a bye. And you can still factor into those rankings, by the way, the value of I played in a conference championship versus you. So in that situation, and again, I'm going off the top of my head here, Penn State probably still ends up with a bye. Maybe not. But you're going to end up with Oregon. You're going to end up with Georgia. You probably end up with Notre Dame. Well, yeah, no, you would. You'd end up with Notre Dame and then either Texas or Penn State. And I think you could flip either one of those and probably be okay.
Well, and that was going to be my question, too, was specifically about Notre Dame. Is in that system, you're going to have a Notre Dame that doesn't play for a conference championship, and now you're rewarding them.
And I think that's fair.
Punishing somebody that does win.
I think that's a fair flaw in the proposal. Absolutely it is.
It's all broken. It'll never be fixed. We'll always find something to complain about.
I will say that I think that puts you closer. The other thing, and I don't know if I feel like this is more important than, hey, you get an automatic berth, not an automatic bye. I think it kind of goes hand in hand with it. The other piece of this is you've got to reseed the teams. When you so take a look at Oregon, right? This is not rocket science. This is low hanging analysis. That's why you're here at Rifle Pod. Take a look at an Oregon team. They get the bye. They are going to play either Ohio State or Tennessee in round 2. How in the world is that possible? Like that should not. Congratulations, Oregon. As a reward for being the only undefeated team in the country, you're going to play the Buckeyes or the Volunteers in round 2.
Well, and people from the Ohio State side were talking specifically about Ohio State's path. And we'll talk a little bit about this when we get ready to kind of preview. It's like a mini preview. Ohio State, in order to win the national championship, their path, most likely, I mean, the initial one for sure, they have to beat Tennessee. Then they have to beat Oregon.
Yep.
Then you potentially have to beat Texas. And then potentially Georgia, all of which. So if you play Oregon, you're at the Rose Bowl, West Coast.
Yep.
Then you play in the Cotton Bowl, which is in Texas. Then you play in Atlanta, which guess where that's at. And so,
guess where that's at.
And so,
oh man,
you're potentially playing 2 teams in the semis and the championship in their home base.
Yeah.
If Ryan Day wants to save his job, boy, you've got the path.
Yeah.
And
we'll get to that here momentarily, won't we?
In Jace's words, poison ivy and razor wire.
Poison ivy and razor wire. Yeah. And I think though you've got like, that's why you've got to read, and not for Ohio State's sake, like Ohio State's where they should be.
Yeah.
But for, there's no reason that let's say that SMU gets by Penn State. For the sake of example, let's just say that happens. There's no reason that Oregon should be playing Ohio State instead of SMU. There's no reason. There's absolutely no reason. There's no reason that Oregon should have to play the 8 or 9. Excuse me. That Oregon should have to play the 8 or 9 versus the 11. Let's say Indiana upsets Notre Dame. There's no reason that
Georgia.
Well, and I guess that's where they're on the bracket. But like, there's no reason Oregon shouldn't get to play Indiana.
Yeah,
like that. The failure to reseed that makes no sense whatsoever. And again, it takes teams that have earned the right to have a clear path that suddenly don't. Oregon over Tennessee, Oregon over Ohio State is not a done deal. And then Oregon gets to play Texas if that, could play Texas in the semis. In the semifinals, I start to get a little bit more like, well, it's the semis. It should be the best teams. But still, by that same token, let's say that a team like Indiana makes their way through. Let's say that SMU finds their way through Penn State and Boise. Why would Oregon not get to benefit from that? Like that just makes no sense to me.
That's what I was looking at just when the bracket originally released yesterday. So I'm looking at these matchups, and outside of the one quadrant that specifically has Ohio State in it, a lot of these are kind of cakewalks for the higher seed. You've got Clemson versus Texas. The winner of that goes and plays number 4 Arizona State. I think Texas is going to beat both of those teams, and I don't know if I think it'll be close.
Listen, I'm just going to say, Arizona State is sneaky.
They're good. They're good, and they've got a Mansfield kid.
I don't. No one cares. No one cares.
You know, deep down, I'm going to be
Arizona State's a sneaky team. That's all I'll say.
Go Sun Devils. But to me,
can we say that we're from River Radio? We're from a ministry. Can we say
we did?
So Forks Up or whatever. Okay, cool.
No, that's where you get more dangerous.
Okay.
Texas to me has an easier chance. Then you look at the SMU Penn State. Whoever plays that goes with Boise. I think Penn State's got an easier path to go to the semis. Then even with Georgia, depending on what Carson Beck's arm looks like, I've seen video going around, and this is just speculation and rumors. It's nothing, but there's speculation on the sideline. He was pointing at his elbow, looked at a teammate, and said it's bad. It was obvious when he went out at the very end of the game to hand the ball off. The dude's arm was a slinky. He wasn't moving that thing.
Their backup though,
and he played well.
And this is where people will try to throw out the Florida State comparison with Jordan Travis. This ain't that.
No.
Okay. Georgia's still a fully functioning football team. Yeah. Anytime your starting quarterback gets injured, it's going to be probably a downgrade. Maybe the exception of Texas. I said it.
Fair. Fair.
But like that. This ain't that.
No, they'll obviously take a hit if he ends up being out. But I thought Stockton came in. Isn't that his name, Stockton?
Sure.
Gunner Stockton or something. Sure. That sounds like a name that's for a guy that plays.
That's an SEC name.
That's a guy that would play at Georgia. Yeah. Clearly, we know ball. That was him. He came out and played well. He had the mistake towards the end of the game. Outside of that, I thought he played well.
Yeah.
But that changed. I mean, Carson Beck has been their guy last year and this year. He's played well. Him going down is going to impact them at least a little bit.
For sure.
But I still think Georgia going up against a Notre Dame or an Indiana feels to me like an easier path for them to make it to the semis. The Oregon, like you're arguing for, they've got a tough battle every single matchup they're going to have to go against.
Yeah.
And whoever wins the Natty this year is going to have to really prove it. And I think that's what's nice about this playoff system is sure, you might have some games, and we talked about it, I think, a couple episodes ago. You're going to have some games where years from now, it might even be this year, it could be next year, whenever, you might have a number 12 upset a number 5.
Yeah. It could be this year.
It could be. It could be. You're going to have those at some point down the line that's going to make the argument for, well, that's why they deserve to be there. This year ain't going to be it, though.
Yeah, and I think what's been interesting about the way the bracket ended up shaking out is if I had to pick a spot for my team to be, I think I'm probably, the 5 seed was obviously the one that everybody was wanting because you had Iowa State in there, which Arizona State showed why they shouldn't have been in there. You had BYU in there. I honestly think the 6th seed where Penn State is the number 1, because I'll tell you what, Clemson, Dabo's got Clemson in a good spot right now. I didn't think that they were going to get the win. I did not think that after losing to South Carolina, I did not think that Clemson was going to beat SMU. They did. You've now got a couple weeks to prep. I don't know that I love being Texas right now. I really don't. It's obviously a better spot than Ohio State's in, but I think that 6th seed with SMU and Boise State ends up being the one. And now watch us say that. Watch SMU beat Penn State and watch Boise
Indiana
beat SMU.
Beat Notre Dame. They all upset everybody, and we get a natty of like.
I am excited, by the way. I think these matchups are all going to be fascinating. Like these are all going to be as much as I say, and we've said before, 12 teams don't deserve to be in the playoff. This is going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be a lot of fun.
I'm so ready. And I know I would be more excited to see an Alabama or Miami in this game, but I am really genuinely excited to see Indiana at Notre Dame because, like I was arguing, they've only played one team this year that was worth anything in Ohio State, and they got dismantled. I am curious because they were hyped up so much. Is this team the real deal?
Yeah. Well,
what does Kurt Cignetti have up his sleeve going to South Bend? Because we've been in that environment.
You get to play in state as well, which is like that to me is fascinating.
Yeah.
It's not quite the same, but it's
a night game.
It'd be like Michigan State, right? Like it's not at that level, but it's an in-state battle. Like that is fascinating to me. Obviously the Ohio State one is the one with the most intrigue for us. We will, by the way, if you're like, well, aren't they going to break it down? Not yet. So next Monday, our next episode we are going to be breaking down Tennessee and Ohio State because number one, this ain't our day job. And we've got some other stuff we got to do.
We have things to do. Okay.
Believe it or not, you're like
watch Kyle Monongai Rutgers highlights because his season is about done.
We will not be doing that. I do want to give like 60-second initial thoughts on Tennessee, Ohio State. I want you to go for, and again, I'm literally talking about not even break it. You've got basically a minute to just go, hey, this is my gut reaction because I've got 2 things that I want to say on this matchup initially, but you go first.
Gut reaction, terrified, excited. I think this is the exact scenario that Ohio State fans should want. And that sounds stupid because a lot of people are like, well, you should want the number 6 seed or the number 5 seed or whatever so you get an easier path. No. I want to see just how tough mentally, how tough physically. I want to see if Ryan Day can recover from this to know what I can look forward to next year. Ryan Day, this is your prove it year. And we've said that from the start, but right now is really the case.
Yeah, it's not been good so far.
You've got 4 tough games if you make it all the way. And you've got to, in my mind, we didn't really hit on this, and that's fine. We'll talk about it more, obviously, next year or next week. This Ryan Day's every single game coaching for his job. And this was a wheel route question for me that we didn't get to.
Let's do it.
How far does Ryan Day have to lead this team in order to save his job? For me, and this isn't, I kind of break it up. What do I think he has to do versus what would I like to see?
Yeah.
In my mind, for the people that are in leadership at the Ohio State University, for Ryan Day to be the coach, the head coach of this team next year, he has to make it past this round and be competitive against Oregon. If he loses first round, they might not even let him get off the field. He goes to Oregon and gets absolutely torched, he's done. If he goes in and has another close competitive game against an Oregon, he makes it past the first round, I think you see him as the head coach next year, whether I like it or not.
What do you want to see?
In my mind,
to keep his job right now.
In my mind, I need to see you go out there and really handle business against Tennessee. Right now, I think they're 7.5, 7-point favorites.
Wow.
That's what I saw last. It could have changed.
Okay.
That was yesterday's line. They're like 7.5, 7-point favorites. I think the defense has the chance to be able to shut this Tennessee offense down. I know they've got a good quarterback. They've got a really good running back. You're playing at the shoe. I want to see how this defense, I want to see how this offensive line comes out and plays. I want to see them play some bully ball. I want to see some grit. I want to see some anger. I want to see almost like they feel a little disrespected, that they're upset at themselves for losing the game, for people starting to doubt, blocking out the noise. If I'm Ryan Day, I'm going into that locker room. I'm grabbing everybody. I'm going up to Jack Sawyer, JTT, Will Howard. I'm pointing at Will Howard and saying, people are saying Kyle McCord's better than you. Go out there and prove them wrong. JTT and Jack Sawyer, they're saying you don't have a legacy here. They're saying that your time here at Ohio State's been wasted. What are you going to do about it? Nobody in this whole stadium wants me as the coach next year. They don't believe in you. They don't believe in you after the Michigan game. The only people that are going to believe that we can get this done are the people in this locker room. Let's go out there and prove them wrong. I need that kind of motivational speech from my head coach. I need the players to come out motivated, ready to prove the world wrong, that they're still the Buckeyes. They're still as talented as this roster appears on paper. I need to see them absolutely dismantle the Volunteers. Then I need to see them go on a revenge tour. They need to go to Oregon.
Let me tell you, that doesn't end well. 2018, 2019, whatever that was. It don't end well.
Saying it out loud, but they need to go in. They need to be competitive. If they beat Oregon and they show some toughness in those first two games. If
you beat Oregon, it's on.
That to me saves Ryan Day's job.
Okay. He's got to
make it to the semis.
He's got to get through Tennessee and Oregon.
And is what I would say in my mind.
Yeah,
what
I hear what you're saying about Ross Bjork and all that stuff.
What I think is going to happen is they just got to get past the first round.
Let me give you my Ryan Day thoughts, and then I'll give you my brief, quick 60 seconds on Ohio State, Tennessee. I don't think he has to do anything to keep his job.
You think he's there?
I think whether this is, by the way, this is not my, like, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of administration of Bjork and all that stuff. I don't think he has to do anything. I don't think the stomach is there. I've heard sports talk about this all last week. I don't think the stomach is there from the boosters. I don't think the stomach is there from the administration.
Do you think they want to, or they just don't feel the pressure?
I think they don't care about what the average fan has to say about it. I think they go, he's made the playoffs. And at a $30 million, $40 million buyout, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's true.
I just don't see it. If I'm a Buckeye fan, by the way, and forget even that, just if I'm trying to be an objective college football fan and I look at the last 4 years from Ryan Day and I go, you ain't beat Michigan. You've made the playoff, twice? Mm-hmm. Now, so once
lost to Georgia.
Yeah, so you haven't made the Big Ten champ. So you have not beaten Michigan, not won a playoff game, not won a Big Ten championship. If I'm trying to be objective, or if I'm trying to be an Ohio State fan, you better go win the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, see ya. Because otherwise, what am I paying you for? Is kind of my question.
Mm-hmm. What do you do here?
What is it you'd say you do here? If the goals are, and this is not rocket science. If the goals are beat Michigan, win a Big Ten championship, win a natty. You have done none of those things in the last 4 years. You got to a national championship game during COVID after playing 8 games?
And got smacked.
You played 8 games. Like, if you want to hang your hat on that, I guess good for you. That does not, genuinely, maybe it means something to Ohio State fans. I don't know how it does. And by the way, what have you done for me lately matters a heck of a lot more. Well, if you are not accomplishing any of the 3 goals that you have, what am I paying you for?
And to your point, when you're talking about the what Ross Bjork and all the administration people think, and you're saying, I don't think they care about the average fan, but I think that's where, with this new age kind of system with the NIL stuff, if that's what's communicated to the fan base is, we hear your cries. Now it gets more into the professional sports area, where you're looking at this team and you're going, okay, well, the fan base is unhappy with the coach. They want him fired, XYZ. And I get that you don't make business decisions off of what a random guy on the couch on a Saturday wants to tell you. But when the vast majority
they're not reading our tweets.
Well, and they might be when the vast majority of your fan base, where you're fully funded from, because the NIL helps to get these players on your team. I wonder
that's the $20 million roster thing.
And I wonder if that's where the communication from administration, where they go, yeah, we're not getting rid of this guy because we don't really care what you think. And also he does enough for us. I wonder if that's where you start to see a change in, okay, well, we're not going to give you NIL dollars anymore until you make the change.
This is where I absolutely understand what you're saying, but this is where I don't buy that, is I go, listen, have you met people? We love football. And that could even be used as a counter argument to what I'm saying about who's going to pay for this. Like, at some point, will people go, hey, we love football. Yeah, it's expensive. We don't care. Maybe for me, if I'm a Buckeye, which thank God I'm not, but if I'm a Buckeye, I'm looking at this going, the whole thing was natty or bust, right? So which is it? You didn't beat Michigan. You didn't win the Big Ten championship. You didn't even go to the Big Ten championship. It's kind of natty or bust for me if I'm a Buckeye, I think, because otherwise my question does come back to I mean, we've said this in the offseason when you guys were crowned offseason national champions or whatever.
Every year, baby.
Was cool. Like, if not now, when? If not with this team and this roster, this team's not going to be better next year than they are this year.
Well, and that was, I don't know if you read my blog. You can check it out at rivalpod.com.
I didn't.
But it was basically, that where I was talking about the whole title of it was Are We There Yet? And it was talking about how if you've ever driven in a car on a road trip with a kid and the kid is constantly saying, hey, are we there yet?
I'm having some trauma right now.
That's how I feel like with Ryan Day is all along we've been told we're going to get here. We're going here. Don't worry. And I'm just in the backseat like, hey, Ryan, are we there yet?
Can I at least have some M&Ms?
I have to pee. Like,
oh, we don't use that letter?
It's one of those.
Can I have some X and X's?
Yeah. It's one of those things where I feel like all Buckeye fans are in the back seat waiting to get to the destination that we were promised, and we're all just asking, are we there yet?
I love it, by the way.
Thank
in
you.
case that wasn't clear. My brief 10-second thoughts on Ohio State, Tennessee. This is a tough matchup. Again, not rocket science. It's a tough matchup. We'll break it down next episode. If you're not familiar with Tennessee, you probably know, oh yeah, Tennessee won that one big game and they lost to Arkansas. If that's all you know about them, fair. But this is Nikhil Iamaleava.
I was going to ask, that I sat there for a while yesterday because I've heard it many times, but I was like, I'm not even going to attempt to say this.
It's kind of like Tuimoloau was, right?
Yeah.
And I almost just stumbled over right there.
I got there.
Iamaleava is a really good quarterback. That's going to be a question mark because we've talked about the Ohio State secondary, right? With Denzel Burke and pass interference Igbinosun there. He
had none against Michigan
because we didn't throw the ball downfield and still won. Love it. Imagine if we have a passing game, right? Well, and you're about to, because Tennessee has a passing game, and also Tennessee's strength on defense is the defensive line. And so if you don't know anything else about Tennessee, that's what you need to know. Good quarterback, really good quarterback.
Young.
Also a really good defensive line, which obviously was a huge conversation piece with Ohio State. It gave them trouble. Now, Ohio State's also shifting offensive line pieces around. Not a great time to be doing that, to be honest with you. So that's all I'll say on that. The other thing I want to say is, and I don't think you've been guilty of this, but the Ohio State fans talk about, oh yeah, get them SEC boys up where it's cold in late December. Here we go. Number one, Knoxville is not that cold, or Columbus is not that much colder than Knoxville. Okay. So that's number one. Number two, a weather advantage for Ohio State. Your coach just complained that you couldn't pass the ball because it was a tad windy out.
Here's the thing.
This is not, if anything, this is an advantage for Tennessee. There's no weather advantage to playing a night game in Ohio for a team that can't run the ball.
Well, and this is the thing.
That's ridiculous.
This is going to sound extremely bougie, but
do it.
But you and I have been sidelined at a handful of these games.
A ton of these.
Those benches are heated, my guy.
Yeah.
They've got giant fans that blow enormous heat out of them. Those players are not sitting on the bench freezing like the guy from Home Alone.
Have you seen the three sheep in a trench coat things that they put over people? They're going to be okay.
They are fine. They are on the field for a little tiny bit, unless it is like Buffalo Bills blizzard season out there, then sure.
But that's the other piece, though.
But if it's just cold and a little windy, that's not going to make a difference like you think.
And coming off a loss to Michigan, where, again, your coach complained that it was a tad windy, which, by the way, maybe that's not a reason why you didn't pass downfield, my guy. You saying, oh, it's going to be cold, that's an advantage, is ridiculous.
Will Howard not knowing he was even in Columbus, Ohio at the moment is maybe
and again, once again,
bigger reason.
The lack of awareness by the casual fan. And it's not just an Ohio State thing. It is in this case. The lack of awareness by the casual fan. I don't like that
you pointed at me when you said that.
By the casual fan is ridiculous.
Is the casual fan behind me?
Is the casual fan with us in the room right
now?
By the way, because I don't want to make my fellow Michigan fans mad, we'll break down the Michigan-Alabama stuff later too. Here's the only thing I'll say about this. Money grab.
Why?
Michigan obviously I'm ecstatic that they upset Ohio State, whatever. Michigan still is a team that's barely above 500, whose strength on the defensive line will not play in a bowl game.
Yeah, Loveland and Will Johnson most likely won't play.
Well, Loveland's not playing. Johnson's not playing. Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, not playing. Josiah Stewart, probably not playing. Who knows? But the strength of Michigan's team on that defensive line ain't playing in this game. So we're going to take a 7-5 Michigan team whose strength on defense is not playing in this game. And we're going to pick, I don't know, a team with an argument to be in the college football playoff. What a money grab. Here's where I'm okay with it, though, because if you're looking at Michigan for next year, because this is going to be a ton of young guys that are going to get in. This is going to be the Ben Halls. This is, Davis. You'd ask me if Jaden Davis would play. It's going to be Davis Warren because he's earned it. Because he obviously with Underwood coming in, he's not playing next year. You're going to have a chance for a lot of young guys from Michigan to get playing time against a still really good opponent. Yeah, Alabama will have the same issue with the guys sitting out.
Yeah.
But this is going to be against another blue blood program. This is great experience for Michigan for next year.
Will I sit down and watch the entire thing?
Absolutely. New Year's Eve, man.
Yeah. What else am I doing?
If nothing else, I'm glad that you're not I get, it's the ReliaQuest Bowl. It's a New Year's Eve bowl against Alabama. I'm pleased with that. I'm glad it's not, the Pinstripe Bowl against Duke.
Hey, you calm it down. That's Rutgers' go-to is the Pinstripe Bowl that they won.
It's a money grab. It's dumb. It doesn't make any sense why you would match up Alabama and Michigan this season. Caitlin DeBoer is going, you've got to be kidding me. After leaving Washington to go to Alabama, and now they get Michigan again. And by the way, if it goes south, we go, LOL, we beat Ohio State. And hey, let's go watch Rose Bowl highlights from last year. So this is good. Good for Michigan. And by the way, the other piece of making a bowl game in all this whole thing, doesn't matter who you would have played, but making a bowl game is Bryce Underwood gets to be there for practices. That matters a heck of a lot, by the way, for a kid who asked Sharon Moore, hey, how late is the facility open? And he said, as late as you want it to be. That's the attitude of a winner. I'm glad he gets to be there for bowl games. You got anything else on that? On Michigan, Alabama, or Ohio State, Tennessee, or anything else you didn't get to that you want to throw out there real quick? Again, we'll break the Ohio State game in particular down next episode too at Rival Pod. So be sure to subscribe.
No, I think I'm good. I think I'm all right. I don't want to say too much.
I'm not trying to be facetious here. Did Rutgers make a bowl game?
They sure did.
Who did they play?
I forget the name of the bowl. I want to say
that's not good.
I want to say it's what's the rate one that Michigan was
the guaranteed rate
bowl in Phoenix against Kansas State is who their draw was. But
cool.
You're not going to see Kyle Monangai. I hope you do. But you're probably not going to see the only real offensive weapon that they've got. Well, they've done better passing, so I won't even say that. I can't even diss them. They actually had a decent quarterback.
The Rutgers, Kansas State.
Who would have thought Kaliak Manis would have actually... Yes, that Kaliak Manis would have played well.
It's like the Sickos Committee says, all football is good football, y'all.
Honestly, I'll watch every single second of it.
My boys in Arkansas, my wife's family's from there. If you're wondering, what's up with the Arkansas helmet, my wife's family's from just outside Fayetteville. They get Texas Tech and I think the Liberty Bowl or something.
I love that.
So, woo pig suey, embrace the hog or whatever.
Yeah, I haven't looked too deep into all the bowl games yet because we'll usually do our typical, if you're new to this, we usually do an entire episode where we pick based off who we think's going to win each bowl matchup. And I can't wait. I don't even know who's in the Pop-Tart Bowl. Don't spoil it for me.
Do you really not know?
Have not paid attention.
Can I tell you one team?
Sure.
Can I tell you one team that's in? And I promise you this is true. Do you really not know who's in the Pop-Tart Bowl?
I honestly, once the playoff, because I was with family a lot yesterday.
I'm going to pause for a second. If you right now know the information that I have about one of the teams in the Pop-Tart Bowl, just sit with it for a moment. Are you ready for this?
I am.
It's Miami.
Nuh-uh. Let's go.
Cam Ward choosing Wild Berry Frost is going to be...
Give me a s'mores and I'm there.
Now I want a Pop-Tart.
Microwave it at about 15 seconds. I'm set.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
The Rivalry is a production of River Radio Ministries. Want live updates from the show? Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at RivalPod. To learn how to support the show, shop our merch, and read our blogs, visit rivalpod.com. Make sure to follow us wherever you're listening now. And if you like what you're hearing, tell a friend so they can listen too.